sugar when you're close to me. You love me right now.
So before you get into the business, you really don't know what it's about until you get into it. You know, once you rub heads with snakes and, you know, you get jaded.
From the music world, R&B legend D'Angelo has passed.
D'Angelo was aware of his fate months before anyone else. Yet the way he chose to face it surprised everyone who believed they truly knew him.
You never want to be at a place where you feel like you've arrived. It's always an upward incline.
D'Angelo was aware of his fate months before anyone else. Yet the way he chose to face it surprised everyone who believed they truly knew him.
There's a lot of people just copying the same format. Back in the day, it was more about being original. Originality was...
His final confessions unveiled a truth that changes everything we thought we knew about his mysterious disappearance. Let's dive in. D'Angelo passed away on October 14th, 2025, but the man who took his last breath in that Manhattan apartment had been preparing for this moment long before the 15 months following his pancreatic cancer diagnosis. Those closest to him would later recognize that his actions during that final year were filled with subtle hints of knowledge he had quietly carried for years. Insights that finally explained the decades of erratic behavior everyone had chalked up to fame and addiction.
D'Angelo, whose real name is Michael Eugene Archer, passed away due to complications from pancreatic cancer, which now appears he was quietly battling.
The pancreatic cancer was just one part of a larger story D'Angelo had kept hidden from everyone, even his closest family. In his final weeks, he stayed in a Manhattan apartment surrounded by the instruments that had defined his life. The diagnosis had arrived during what should have been a routine checkup. After months of unexplained weight loss and persistent fatigue, symptoms he had initially blamed on the stress of recording and touring. Learning the truth brought the harsh reality that pancreatic cancer often leaves little time and limited options. Instead of going public, D'Angelo chose to spend his remaining months focusing on music and family. He quietly reached out to old collaborators, not to announce his illness, but to express gratitude for their shared musical journeys. Those conversations, later shared by the recipients, revealed a man using his final months to mend relationships and find closure. Meanwhile, his son with Angie Stone, Michael D'Angelo Archer II, was grappling with his own grief after losing his mother in a car accident earlier the year.
Singer Angie Stone has died in a car crash. We're told she had just finished a concert in Mobile, Alabama Friday, was heading to Atlanta when the van she was riding in...
During D'Angelo's final months, his 27-year-old son, performing as Suyo Twain, became his primary caretaker. The decision to keep his illness private reflected the same instinct that had once driven him to withdraw from public life after the overwhelming reaction to his untitled video. D'Angelo had always struggled with fame and its intrusions, preferring his music to speak louder than his personality. Even in the face of death, he upheld the boundary between his public artistry and private life. The message that emerged from those closest to him was not about cementing a legacy or making a grand statement. It was a simple expression of gratitude. Gratitude for the chance to create, to collaborate, and to contribute something meaningful to the world. He had spent his career mastering the art of emotional vulnerability through music, and in his final act, he faced death with the same honesty that had defined his greatest songs. Michael Eugene Archer was born on February 11th, 1974, in Richmond, Virginia, into a family where music and faith were inseparable. His father, a Pentecostal preacher, filled the household with gospel hymns and spiritual testimonies, while his mother introduced him to the secular rhythms of R&B and soul, sounds that would ultimately shape his musical DNA. The Archer home became Michael's first conservatory. Sunday mornings were spent in church, absorbing the call and response traditions of Black gospel music and watching congregants move to rhythms that seemed to emerge from a deeper spiritual source. These early experiences taught him that music could act as a form of prayer, a way to express emotions too complex for words. Richmond in the 1980s, a city balancing its Confederate past with its evolving identity as a hub of Black culture and education. offered young Michael a musical education that extended far beyond his family's church. At age 10, discovering Prince's Purple Rain revealed to him the power of one artist mastering multiple instruments to create entire sonic worlds. This would become his roadmap for musical ambition. Recognizing his extraordinary talent, his mother enrolled him in piano lessons, which soon revealed his natural ability to hear complex harmonies and recreate them effortlessly. Yet Michael's real education came from hours in the church basement, experimenting with the electric piano and layering sounds to turn simple melodies into intricate musical conversations. During his teenage years, Richmond's emerging hip-hop scene, through radio and cassette tapes passed among friends, exposed him to new rhythms. He learned how drum machines could create patterns that were both mechanical and deeply human, a tension that would later define his production style. He began blending the live instrumentation learned in church with contemporary R&B beats. In high school, Michael formed his first band, performing at talent shows and small local venues. These early performances showcased his magnetic yet reserved stage presence, able to command attention while seeming almost uncomfortable in the spotlight. Audiences noticed his habit of closing his eyes during performances, as if retreating entirely into the music. His relationship with his father grew complicated during these years, as Michael's musical interests expanded beyond gospel into what some considered secular, or even sinful, territory. The tension between spiritual music and worldly success became a defining struggle, one that would shape his artistic journey and internal conflicts throughout his career. By his senior year, Michael had begun writing original songs that fused the harmonic richness of gospel with the rhythmic sophistication of contemporary R&B. These early compositions revealed a young artist wrestling with themes of desire, spirituality, and identity, topics that his church community found both impressive and unsettling. The music was undeniably powerful, yet it explored human experiences beyond traditional religious frameworks. Choosing to pursue music professionally meant leaving Richmond for New York City, a move that offered both artistic opportunity and a spiritual challenge. Michael was stepping away from the community that had shaped his musical foundation to enter an industry governed by very different rules. Carrying the lessons of his childhood, he soon discovered how those foundations would be tested by the pressures of commercial success. In the early 1990s, New York City was experiencing a renaissance of Black musical creativity. Michael arrived at a moment when the industry craved artists capable of blending traditional soul with contemporary production. Renaming himself D'Angelo, drawing from his middle name and his admiration for the painter Michelangelo, he signaled artistic ambitions that went far beyond commercial success. The demo tape that secured his first record deal was recorded in a basement studio with equipment most established artists would have considered subpar. Yet the raw production only enhanced the intimacy of his voice and the organic quality of his arrangements. Record executives sensed something rare, authenticity that could not be manufactured or replicated. Creating his debut album, Brown Sugar, became an exercise in perfectionism that would define D'Angelo's career. He insisted on playing most of the instruments himself, layering track upon track until each song became a complete sonic environment. The process took nearly 2 years and often alienated producers and engineers who struggled to match his vision for contemporary R&B. The album's title track reflected his fascination with the intersection of sexual desire and musical pleasure, blurring the line between physical attraction and artistic passion. Its production was deceptively simple, a basic drum pattern, understated bass line, and D'Angelo's voice floating above it all like smoke. When Brown Sugar was released in 1995, it immediately marked D'Angelo as a unique force in contemporary R&B. The album sold 3 million copies worldwide and, more importantly, inspired a generation of musicians searching for ways to honor their musical heritage while creating something genuinely new. Artists like Lauryn Hill, Erykah Badu, and Maxwell later credited Brown Sugar with opening doors to innovative combinations of traditional and contemporary sounds. The success brought opportunities that were both thrilling and overwhelming. Television appearances highlighted an artist clearly uncomfortable with the promotional side of the industry, revealing a man more at ease, letting his music speak than himself. D'Angelo would perform brilliantly on stage, yet retreat into himself during interviews, offering thoughtful but brief answers, as if discussing his music could somehow diminish its power. During this period, his collaborations with other artists produced some of the most memorable R&B of the decade. His duet with Lauryn Hill on Nothing Even Matters exemplified his ability to create musical conversations that were both intimate and universal. His work on the Roots album Half-Life further demonstrated how his church-trained harmonies could enhance hip-hop production without overpowering it. But with success came scrutiny that D'Angelo found increasingly difficult to manage. Interviews often focused as much on his appearance as his music, with journalists commenting on his light complexion and long hair, making him acutely aware of how his image might influence perceptions of his artistry. He began to realize that being a successful black male artist involved navigating expectations that had little to do with talent. The pressure to follow up Brown Sugar drove him into increasingly obsessive recording sessions for his second album. D'Angelo became known for spending entire nights in the studio, experimenting with arrangements that could be completely altered by the next session. Musicians who worked with him described a perfectionist, constantly chasing a sound that seemed just beyond his reach. The gap between albums stretched to 5 years, during which D'Angelo's reputation shifted from rising star to industry enigma. Record executives who had once celebrated his artistic independence now pressured him to work faster and make compromises. The young man who had arrived in New York with a clear musical vision was discovering that commercial success came with demands threatening the very creativity that had made him exceptional. This 5-year hiatus became a period of intense musical experimentation, culminating in Voodoo, released in 2000. The album represented a complete departure from conventional contemporary production, blending sounds that felt both ancient and futuristic, redefining the boundaries of R&B. For Voodoo, D'Angelo brought together a core group of musicians, including drummer Questlove, bassist Pino Palladino, and guitarist Mike Campbell, forming what became essentially a neo-soul supergroup. Recording sessions took place across various studios in New York and Virginia, with D'Angelo determined to capture the kind of spontaneous musical interaction that had defined classic soul records of the 1960s and 1970s. The album's approach to rhythm was groundbreaking. Rather than programming drum tracks with mathematical precision, D'Angelo and Questlove introduced subtle timing variations that made the music feel alive, almost breathing. Beats would occasionally rush and then pull back, creating a groove that pulsed like a human heartbeat instead of a mechanical machine. This technique, later known as drunk drumming, would go on to influence countless recordings by other artists. Voodoo pushed D'Angelo into lyrical territory that was both more sexually explicit and spiritually complex than anything on Brown Sugar. Tracks like Devil's Pie explored the intersection of temptation and artistic creation, while Playa delved into the emotional toll of romantic success. The album treated sexuality as both a creative force and a potential source of obsession, reflecting D'Angelo's own complicated relationship with desire and fame. The recording process grew increasingly intense as his perfectionism reached new heights. Musicians recall sessions lasting 12 to 15 hours, with D'Angelo overdubbing vocals until he captured the exact balance of passion and control. Entire songs were sometimes scrapped after months of work if he felt they failed to convey the emotional truth he sought. It was a music video for Untitled, How Does It Feel?, that transformed D'Angelo from a respected musician into a cultural phenomenon and, unintentionally, a sex symbol. The video sparked widespread discussion about black male sexuality in popular culture. Fans, particularly women, responded with fervor, while some male critics questioned whether he was objectifying himself or being objectified. The video's success created expectations about his appearance and sexual availability that had little to do with his musical intentions.
Palladino and guitarist Mike Campbell, creating what essentially became a neo-soul supergroup. The recording sessions took place in various studios across New York and
Voodoo earned critical acclaim, including Grammy wins, cementing D'Angelo as one of his generation's most important musicians. But the attention also brought scrutiny and pressures that he struggled to navigate. Concert audiences often screamed during his most intimate ballads, making it difficult to cultivate the contemplative atmosphere his music demanded. Record executives hoped he would replicate the success of Untitled, but D'Angelo resisted efforts to capitalize on his sex symbol status. He avoided photo shoots and declined interviews, increasingly frustrated by the gap between public perception and his artistic vision. Behind the scenes, D'Angelo began to retreat from the industry that had propelled him to fame. His disappearance following Voodoo became one of contemporary music's great mysteries. The artist who had just released one of the decade's most acclaimed albums simply vanished, canceling tours, avoiding interviews, and returning to his Virginia home for what would become a 14-year hiatus from recording.
Early depression when the music was just starting to change.
Voodoo's lyrical content pushed D'Angelo into territory that was more explicitly sexual and spiritually complex than anything on Brown Sugar. Songs like Devil's Pie explored the intersection of temptation and artistic creation, while Playa Playa examined the emotional cost.
As the early 2000s progressed, calls from record executives grew increasingly desperate as D'Angelo's behavior became more unpredictable. Virgin Records had invested millions, expecting a follow-up to Voodoo, but that album never materialized. Studio sessions, costing thousands per day, were often booked and then abandoned when D'Angelo failed to show up, leaving musicians and engineers waiting for an artist who seemed to have vanished without explanation. His weight loss, initially tied to preparations for the Untitled video, had escalated into something more concerning. Friends and collaborators described a man obsessed with maintaining an impossible physical standard, exercising compulsively and restricting his diet in ways that affected both his health and performance. Once naturally lean, he became almost gaunt, losing the commanding stage presence that had made his live shows so captivating. In 2001, a major concert in Europe ended in disaster when D'Angelo appeared visibly intoxicated and struggled to remember his own lyrics. Then, in 2006, the death of his friend and collaborator Jay Dilla dealt a profound blow, deepening D'Angelo's depression and isolation. Dilla had been one of the few who truly understood his creative process, and losing that connection removed a key motivation for continuing his musical journey. By 2005, D'Angelo had effectively been blacklisted in large segments of the music industry, not through malice, but because too many had lost time, money, and professional credibility trying to work with him. The artist, once hailed as a genius, had unintentionally sabotaged the relationships that might have helped restore his career. His quiet resurgence began in 2012 with his first significant public performance in over a decade at the Bonnaroo Music Festival. The show was brief and tentative, yet it revealed an artist ready to reconnect with the music that had defined him. Audience members described a changed performer, older, more vulnerable, yet whose voice retained all its power and emotional depth. Behind the scenes, D'Angelo had been confronting the addictions and personal struggles that had derailed his career. The process was long and arduous, involving multiple attempts at rehabilitation and therapy to address both substance abuse and the anxieties tied to fame. The man who reemerged was fundamentally different from the one who had disappeared after Voodoo. Recording Black Messiah became a 5-year journey, blending renewed creative energy with the hard-earned wisdom of his struggles. Working with his band, The Vanguard, D'Angelo approached music with a sense of purpose that tied his personal recovery to larger themes of social justice and spiritual growth. The album's title reflected his belief that art could serve as a form of healing. The recording process took place in multiple studios, following the same organic approach that had defined Voodoo. Yet the music revealed a maturity born from surviving his darkest.
As D'Angelo's behavior grew more erratic throughout the early 2000s, Virgin Records had invested millions in his career, expecting a follow-up to
Periods, offering a deeper understanding of life and art. Songs like Really Love showcased his ability to merge the sensuality of earlier work with emotional honesty about relationships and personal growth. The album's political themes were also more pronounced than anything he had previously recorded. Tracks such as The Charade and 1,000 Deaths tackled police violence and systemic racism with urgency, reflecting his heightened awareness of social issues developed during his time away from the industry. D'Angelo's personal transformation matched his artistic evolution. He gained weight, adopted a more natural appearance, and rejected the impossible beauty standards that had contributed to his earlier breakdown. The confidence he displayed in interviews and performances suggested someone at peace with aging and imperfection, qualities that enhanced rather than diminished his artistic power. When Black Messiah was unexpectedly released in December 2014, it sent shockwaves through the music world and delighted fans who had waited 14 years for new material. When Black Messiah debuted at number 5 on the Billboard 200, it received widespread critical acclaim, with reviewers praising it as a work worth the long wait. D'Angelo had made a triumphant return without compromising the artistic integrity that had always defined him. The decade following the album's release brought him a sense of peace he had never experienced before. The successful comeback restored not only his reputation and financial stability, but also his confidence as both an artist and a human being. The man who had once been consumed by perfectionism and the pressures of fame learned to create music that met his high artistic standards while preserving his personal well-being. Financial security gave him the freedom to make creative choices without commercial pressure. He could take his time, experiment openly, and decline projects that didn't align with his vision or values. This autonomy removed the stress that had previously made the creative process so punishing. D'Angelo also prioritized his health in a sustainable way. Exercise and diet became practices that supported his overall well-being rather than punishments, replacing the obsessive habits of his earlier years. The music community, which had once regarded him as difficult or unreliable, now recognized him as an elder statesman. Younger artists sought his guidance and collaboration, while his peers from the neo-soul era reconnected with him as friends and respected colleagues. Yet even during these more peaceful years, D'Angelo was privately confronting emerging health concerns. Subtle symptoms, fatigue, and digestive issues appeared, which he initially attributed to aging and decades of rigorous living. Choosing to keep these matters private reflected both his lifelong preference for discretion and his desire to protect the balance he had worked so hard to achieve. The man who had once been driven to the brink by ambition had discovered a sustainable way to balance creativity with personal happiness. But unbeknownst to him and those close to him, time was running out.